Welcome back to the Better Than Best Academy, a community of champions who are committed to personal growth. This podcast has been birthed out of my hope to uplift, inspire, and transform the lives of those that feel called to the creative life. The heart behind this show is to create that space to grow and learn what wasn't taught in school, but learned along the way, to share the story of the next generation of thought leaders, creatives, artists, musicians, you name it. And you may not know them now, but you'll soon never forget. And today's guest is another friend of mine, and I'm super excited to catch up with him. It's been a minute, actually, but we go back to, what was it like when I was rapping and you were promoting shows? You even helped me get the opportunity to open up for Colton Dixon. I mean, it's yeah, we go back for sure. But now he's a successful indie Christian artist himself, and it's none other than HNRY. And now that I've built him up, let's hear his story from his side.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me, first off.
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess we'll take it way back. First off,
If you want to go.
So I was born with a speech impediment, and what that means, for those who don't know, it was hard for me to talk. Words didn't come easy. And because of that, at an early age, I knew people didn't understand me. So like at 3 or 4 years old, I knew people, they just weren't getting it. So I decided to just not speak because it was awkward. Not only was it awkward for them, but it was also awkward for me, trying to repeat myself over and over again, and just nothing was happening. And so I stopped really speaking and didn't speak really that much through elementary and the first part of junior high. And the only person I really spoke to was my mom. My mom was the only person that, like, she was my best friend growing up. And I always had a love for music, but it was like singing in the bathroom, right? Like back then we had CD players, so I'd have the CD player in the bathroom, and I would just be like rocking out in front of the mirror with the door closed, acting like I was, Toby Mac or something. But outside of that, I never really sung in front of people or, outside the house. But at 9 years old, I remember walking into the living room and seeing my mom using our couch as an altar. And she was praying that, like, God, will you heal my son? Will you, restore his speech, help him have a normal childhood? And a few months after that, my speech was restored, and I could speak. I just remember, like, literally just waking up and it just, like, I started talking to my mom, and my mom just started, like, bawling because the words that were coming out of my mouth weren't slurred, or I didn't have a speech impediment. And but even though my speech impediment was what we believe I was healed. Some people think I just grew out of it, but I believe it was a miracle and an answered prayer. Even though my speech impediment was healed, I wasn't like, "Hey guys, I'm back, baby." That's not how it went. I was really shy. I had tons of insecurities, tons of, doubting my self-worth. And at 11 years old, like, that's when you just start to kind of, trying to figure out, like, what you really like, going into your teenage years and into high school. And those are supposed to be times where you're supposed to be, like, the most social, right? Like junior high, and high school. And my thing was, I just turned to sports. So basketball was a big thing for me. And then football was a big thing. And in eighth grade, I broke my arm, like, pretty bad, to where my hand touched my elbow. It was pretty gnarly. So I had surgery, obviously. And I remember the doctor told me that because a lot of, like, the tendons and, I guess, stuff were kind of messed up, that I wouldn't be able to get, like, by the time I got back to where I was, I'd pretty much already be, like, a senior in high school. And so for me, like sports was the only thing that that was the reason I went to school, right? That's the reason why I had decent grades and, kept it. I wasn't an all A student, but I was definitely an ABC student, like right above to where I could still play, and whenever they told me that, I was like, well, why would I go back to school? In my 14-year-old mind, that's like, why would I even go back to school if that's the case? So my mom, I was able to talk my mom into going homeschool. And so I homeschooled through high school. And when I turned 16, got my first job at Brookshire's, sacking groceries. And that was, I guess, at 16, well, I guess 15, right before I got a job. I knew I wanted to do something in the music industry, but I just didn't know what it was. I was a concert rat, mainly in the Christian side of things. So like if it was Winter Jam, if it was Lecrae, if it was Toby Mac, whoever, right? Like I was there. If they were playing within like 100-mile radius, I made my mom drive me to the show. And so like I was a concert rat and I loved music, and I loved one thing that I really, I guess, kind of leaned towards was what was happening. I would always catch myself looking backstage and like, what's going on back there? And I never really we went to, what Winter Jam is, of course. So like we were at Winter Jam, I was like 15 or something. And like Skillet's on, or like Mercy Me, or like some huge band that should have my attention is playing. And I'm over here looking like, stage left, just, all the guys in black wearing black shirts going like, what are they doing? So that was something that interests me. And so I actually went to my church that I was going to at the time, started bringing in bands and thought it was the coolest thing. And I was like, man, like if they can bring in bands, maybe I can bring in bands. And so I started talking to their youth pastor at the time, Eric Platt. And Eric was like, Eric, he was just all about it. Like, so he's like, yeah, man, you can do it. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So I literally Googled like booking agencies and just started calling these guys at 16 years old and booking these shows. Now that I look back, I was way over my head and shouldn't have been probably doing a lot of those shows.
Oh, good times.
But there was a lot of lessons learned, not just in the industry, but just like life lessons. Like, for me growing up, I was always, I think because of my insecurities and just kind of like doubting my self-worth, I always thought that I had to tell people what they wanted to hear, even if it wasn't the truth. And so whenever I was doing shows, there was a lot of times where, that would happen. Like I would tell an artist or a tour manager or whatever, like what I thought they wanted to hear, and so that was like a life lesson to learn that like, just about being honest and being a man of your word. Like, anyways, that's a whole nother thing I could get into, but there's a lot of life lessons that we learned, during that. But yeah, so fast forward, I guess 2017, I get married, and still doing shows, promoting shows a little bit. Had done some tour managing in between that for a couple artists, and just trying to find my way, trying to make money. I'm married now, so it's like, gotta bring home the bread somehow. And so I was doing that, and I remember my wife and I, we were kind of trying to figure out what we wanted to do with our life. A little after we got married, like, did we want to stay in like the Windsor, Silver Springs area, or did we want to move like, out to Fort Worth or wherever, right? Where are we going to go? And around that time, a mutual friend of ours messaged me out of the blue and was like, hey man, we're planting this church in Silver Springs, and I was wondering if you could, if you guys wanted to show up to the launch, one of the launch meetings. And I was like, I told Denver, I was like, yeah, we'll show up. But like in my mind, I was thinking like, we're not gonna like be here. Like we're moving.
Yeah.
We're somewhere. We're not staying in this area. So we went and immediately fell in love with just everything that they were about, and that's what kept us here. And a little bit after kind of committing to being a part of the launch for that plant, that church plant, they asked me to be on the worship team, and that was the first time I'd ever really like been on a platform like that. And I felt like being a part of, I remember there was a creative, like, I don't know if they call it a test, I guess like a challenge, where we did like 30 days of, was it creativeness?
Oh yeah, we did photos and stuff. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a while back. It was like a couple years, like
it was a while back.
Anyway, so we did that. And when we did that, I had made it a goal of my own to try to write like, I think it was like something crazy, like 10 songs. I've never written in my life. I've written a song in my life, right? I'm going to write 10 songs during this period of time. And for those who don't know, I don't play anything. So everything that I write is literally just melodies in my head that go to a voice memo. So that's it. And so during that like 30 days or whatever it was, I ended up writing like 2.5 songs, right? And they were crap. Like they were so bad. It was so bad. And but one of them was one of them I thought was like okay, right? I was like, oh man, this is really good. So I ended up reaching out to another artist friend of mine that I had booked a show with, years prior, and I knew that he was producing music, and I was like, hey man, like I'm doing music now, and I wrote this song, and I was wondering if you could produce it for me. And he was so gracious and was like, yeah, let's do it. And if he knew what he was getting into, he probably would have charged me a lot more. But because that was my first time like in a studio, first time tracking, first time doing anything like that. But that whole thing was, that's really what made me fall in love with chasing this thing, because I fell in love with just the process of creating, and then being a part of the worship team. I felt like that gave me a confidence that I didn't know I had, and then just being involved with other people that are creative. Like I think that was super important, and it's really like no matter how far this HNRY thing goes, like I really have Denver to thank, like for real. He probably don't. I don't know if he really knows the weight of that, because I haven't really shared that with him. But like wherever this thing goes, like it was because he asked me to be a part of the worship team. And yeah, so but yeah, so now I'm trying to give you like brief moments, because I know that I'm a long-winded talker, so I go on for hours, but and tell you literally every step of the way of what happened.
I love it.
Yeah, but yeah, so 2017 we're at church. I write that song. I go to fly to Nashville, produce that song with a guy named Jeff Duncan, who he was in the band called Rapture Ruckus, and he produced like the last 2 Newsboys records, and like he's from New Zealand and has the craziest accent. Anyways, so he produced that one. It was called Fighting for You. I didn't have a name, like an artist name. So like I'm a huge I'm really just a huge Ryan Tedder fan. And I love,
who isn't?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And which means I love One Republic. So the first name that I came up with was True Republic. So that's what I was releasing all my music under.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember True Republic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man.
But so I was at that point, I really wasn't taking it serious, right? Like, it was like whatever. But once I realized like, okay, it's like, and it really was a conversation with my wife. My wife was like, hey, like if you're going to do this music thing, like I'm totally cool with you doing it, but you need to take it serious, because right now it's an expensive hobby. And I was like, dang, like, so that was like 2019. So 2019 was when it was like, okay, like if I'm doing this, like we got to do it. Otherwise, we gotta lay it down because it is expensive. And, yeah, so that's kind of where, I guess the turning point was for me. Changed the name from True Republic to Henry, which is my last name. And we just dropped the E, because I didn't want to meet. I was like, man, I would hate to meet Ryan Tedder for the first time in court. Like that would just be bad.
So funny.
Yeah, that'd be bad. But no. So changed the name to Henry, and I guess it was 2020. I got an email from this producer from Nashville named Riley Friesen. And Riley produces a lot of stuff for Building 429, and produced some stuff for Toby Mac and some other artists. And anyways, Riley messaged me, was like, "Hey man, I've heard around from other people that you've been writing with, and I was wondering if you were in need of a producer." And I was like, "Heck yeah!" So we got on a Zoom with him, and turns out like my budget for the EP that I was wanting to record then was like his rate for like one song. So I was like, man, I can't do it. Like, can you do it for this? And obviously he couldn't. And he's like, I'd love to, but I just can't. And like, but he's like, I know I have some friends that might be able to, work within that budget. Let me hit you back up, later. Well, I didn't hear from this dude for like 3 months. And like, I was thinking, I was like, okay, maybe he was just being nice, like that was just a nice way to get off the Zoom. Right.
Yeah.
And so 3 months later, I get an email, like just literally out of the blue, and it was him. And then he had Jason Roy, the lead singer of Building 429, CC'd in the email. And he's like, "Hey Ben, this is my buddy Jason from Building 429. He's been doing some production stuff since COVID has taken them off the road. And he'd be able to, maybe knock out your project for you at the rate you're doing." And I was like, sick. And of course, the kid that like grew up listening to Christian music and like even like, did a show with Building. Like I was like, okay, like Building 429 is going to produce one of my some songs of mine. Sick. Well, then I ended up getting on the phone with Jason, and I shared my story about my speech impediment that I shared with you. And like he was I guess floored is what he said. He said my story was something that he felt like would resonate with a lot of people. And the conversation very quickly changed from him, wanting to produce a song for me or two to wanting to help me get signed and get to where I wanted to go. And so I ended up flying out to Nashville like that next month. Like this is like April. I guess it was a little bit later. So this is like April 2021. Yeah, April 2021. And so I fly out to Nashville. I meet with Jason and his manager Gabe, and we have a conversation on like what is HNRY going to look like, and what is this, right? And after like 3 hours of talking, their thing was like, hey, like we want to help you get like wherever you want to go. If that's with the label, like let's do it.
Awesome.
Or whatever. Like, yeah. So like I left that like, if I probably looked like a little girl, like skip the airport.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Such a story.
Yeah, that was 2021. And then since then, I ended up, I didn't want to go the major labeled route for a few reasons that we can jump into if you want to later. But I ended up going the route signing with Wings Music Group as a distribution deal. So basically I get the record label services without having to, sign my life away. And yeah, so far we love it.
What a story. So much to unpack there. There's so many different places I definitely want to touch on in this podcast. Hopefully we have
Yeah.
time for it. One thing in particular I really want to touch on is you had this sense of taking action despite limitations. Like
Yeah.
whether it was the speech impediment or whether it was this idea of just a lack of self-confidence or like being shy and introverted. So what was it that despite those limitations, those struggles growing up, what was it that was that turning point for you to say that you can do this and you can step out?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's maybe a couple things. Like for me, it was a conversation with another pastor friend of mine. He told me, he was like, and this was around the same time one church launched in Silver Springs. Another pastor friend of mine told me, he was Jonathan, like, I don't think, because I really don't believe God gave you a gift and then gave you the passion for you not to use it. And
Good.
I chewed on that for a while. Because I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Like if and I remember like, and now that I look back, I feel like the promoting phase, if you want to call it, of my life, like that was like me, like knowing that I was supposed to be a part of this thing, but like trying to like I always believed like, oh, well, the stage, like that's not for me. So I'll be in the back. Right. Like, so I think that was kind of a thing for me. Like I knew where I needed to be, but I ran from it in a way, even though like I was there, right? Just behind the stage. But I think that like, yeah, I think my pastor friend telling me that. And then another thing is just like, I feel like when you're called to do something, you're called to do it. Like, no, it's not really predicated on our feelings. God's not like,
100%.
you're called to do this. And then if you're like, I don't really feel like that, God, he's not like, okay. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're called. It's just a matter of us like stepping out and doing it. Cause I could have not, but
Yeah,
I feel like
for sure.
I feel like that thing though would still be there.
Mhm.
You know, and like, so yeah, I think those two things, I think it was kind of like me feeling like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then also like my friend kind of like confirming that of like, bro, like God would not have given you, like, you know how many, this is funny. It's like, you know how many tone deaf people are out in the world? I was like, oh Lord. But no, like for real though, like, yeah, I feel like it was just like knowing that, like having the passion for it and really knowing deep down that that was what I was supposed to do. And then also like knowing that, like for me, and another reason why we didn't go the route we went, or the reason why we went the route we went, as far as distribution, I want to write songs for like the 12-year-old me, like the songs that he needed to hear. And so like, and for me to, I just feel like that's like, if I felt that way at 12, 13, 14, like I know there's others, and like, I'm, and like, so if I can be that, you know, if a 13-year-old who is just feeling like crap that day and feeling like no one cares about them, and that if they were vanished off the face of the earth that day, no one would care. If they hear a song of mine and that changes and that gives them hope, like, bro, that's all it, like, that's literally, that's worth it. Even like if I didn't make a dime off that song, right? Like that's worth it. And like, so, yeah, so I think it's a lot of those different things. And like, now that I've been kind of doing it a little, like I've been at this for 4 years now, I guess 3.5 years. Like we just played a show in, San Antonio, and I had a dude come up to me and was like pretty much unpacked his life.
Yeah.
And, was saying that like, you know, the song that we did, you know, really spoke to him and he needed to hear that. And like, I've always heard stories like that from other artists, you know, like, oh, we got this email person, blah, blah, blah. Like you hear that, but like whenever you, like, this is a song I wrote in a room with 2 other dudes. And now this person that was 2,000 miles away then hears it. And like, changed his life.
Come on. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. If that doesn't make you want to keep going, I don't know what does.
Yeah. I love that, man. And I'm right there with you. Like I had about a 10-year rap career
Yeah.
until the Lord transitioned me into something else. And I have a friend of mine that will send me screenshots of songs that I made like 5+ years ago. And he's like, this song still wrecks me. And
Yeah.
I'm like, man, like there's nothing like that. But one thing that you touched on that I want to kind of expound on and
Mhm.
kind of elaborate on is you mentioned those people in your life, those people you were surrounded with. And it's so important. John Maxwell says it, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. We hear
Yep.
it and we hear it so much, we almost find it like a cliche, but I feel
Right.
like there's so much value in that. And that's the whole reason, like I've even started this podcast and calling
Mhm.
ourselves like that community of champions. Like if it wasn't for the Denver Hines, the
Yeah.
the Eric Platts, your
Yep.
other pastor friend, like where would we be? And with that, it's kind of twofold because even like now with your music, like I always look at it, it's like who brought us up and who are we reaching back to bring up with us? And I
Right.
think that's so important because it's that idea of like who's on the other side of your obedience. And it's like you said, like what was it that kept you going and having you branch out from despite limitations? It's because if you're called to something, you can't run from it.
No.
And to be obedient on that call, like that's someone's life, someone's miracle is waiting on the other side of your obedience. And that's why I strongly encourage you listening at home. Like it's so important for us to face those fears and to go after those things that keep us up at night. Go after
Yeah.
those things that we are so passionate about because that's where we're going to make the most impact. And it's so important. And to kind of get your thoughts too, is you mentioned you want to write from this indie route, which I'm all for indie. I think it's an amazing way to go because I just think you've got so much more freedom over your content and how you release it. But more specifically, like you said, you're writing for that 12-year-old you.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but when I hop on TikTok or I help with the youth at One Church, which sidebar, shout out to One Church, because I mean,
Yeah.
we're one church in 2 locations. Our lead pastors, Pastor Brian and Crystal Sparks, are crushing it. I'm so grateful for the years that they have just sown into my life. I mean, in your life as well. And
Yeah.
even with Denver, Pastor Denver as campus pastor, it's so crazy. I remember when we were in youth group together. So that's how far me and Denver go back. But not to get too sidetracked, like I was saying, you mentioned how you're writing to that 12-year-old you. So what was those feelings when you were growing up that like those people pleasing? Like, so what would you say to someone right now that may be younger that wants to have this, they're creative. They've got it inside of them and they're not really
Mhm.
sure how to take those next steps. What would you say to them being on the other side of someone who used to be people pleasing and used
Yeah.
to be trying to do it for all the wrong reasons? What would you say to them?
Man, I think like you said, I think the most important thing is to, I mean, I feel like a lot of the people pleasing thing comes from, at least for me, it was like you see where other people are, right? Like I feel like that's what I hate the most about social media is that you'll see like no matter what it is, if it's another worship leader, right? And you see where that worship leader is doing and the opportunities that he or she's getting, or you see whatever it is, right? Or maybe it's someone just that you went to school with and like, they're the career that they chose, they've just gotten so further along than maybe that you think you are, right? Of course, you're only seeing like the stories on their Instagram, and you're piecing this together, right? So I feel like that's where a lot of like the people pleasing comes from is by thinking that, oh well, like these people are, living here, so I need to like maybe like be something I'm not, so that they feel like I'm still on the same level, even though behind their closed doors it's just as screwed up, right? Like they have their problems,
So
they have like so it's not. So I feel like that's where a lot of that comes from. Like I know as an artist when I first started, pursuing music, I got like the reason, and I still say this today, the reason why I'm not a year and a half further than where I am now is because I spent the first year and a half looking at what all these other artists, even indie artists, were doing, and thinking like, man, like, just fixating on what they were doing. And while I was spending that time fixating on what they were doing, I was just falling more behind, because instead of doing my own thing and putting my head down and working to build, this thing, I was spending all my time looking at what they were doing and thinking like, oh man, like, so I think the biggest thing is like, I feel like we just waste time. Like we waste time thinking about things.
Take action.
Yeah. Like literally all it is take action.
It's that comparison trap. You put it simply as that. Like we get stuck in the loop of scrolling. Like we're in this constant cycle of scrolling through all the people that we want to be like, and we're watching other people live their dreams. And if we would just take the time to take action, go after the things that we're going after, because we get into this space, because then you start getting into perfectionism, because it's a form of imposter syndrome. You get into this space of like, I'm never going to be as good as them, so I'm never going to get started. But stop. Don't be paralyzed by perfectionism. And just start, because progress is going to happen when you take action.
Absolutely. And I think that like, as far as going back to like surrounding yourself with people, like, I think that was the biggest thing for me. Like, any success that I've had up to this point and any success I have after this, is because of the people that are around me. It's because the people that are, in the music industry, we call it the people that are in our camp, right? Yeah. Like our camp, like, so like that's why, I feel like that's how the needle gets moving, is when, whether it's music or any other creative outlet, I feel like it still applies. Having people that are in your corner that are cheering you on, and that like genuinely want to see you succeed. And whether that means whether that means it benefits them or not. It's easy to have someone cheer you on if they're, getting kickbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
But the people that aren't, I guess financially, incentivized for your success or your failure, like those are the best people to have in your corner, because they're going to be able to be the most honest. And so, I think take action and then surround yourself with good people. And I feel like people know, like, who's good and who's not, like most people do. And so, I think that's what I would say.
Man, that's huge. And just to piggyback off of that, like getting those people, those coaches, those mentors, like that's why I even started what I'm doing with my personal business that I've grown. Yeah. I'm literally coaching and consulting creatives, not so I can get rich. Like, that's a byproduct of it. But I truly want to help those that were like me, that are on the come up, or that are on the flip side. They've had that success, and now they feel the most alone they've ever felt. Because sometimes you realize you've chased all the fame and the notoriety from your art and your gift, that you realize the top is lonely. And if you're chasing that and that's what's bringing you all your fulfillment, then you'll be left hollow. And that's why I think it's so important to get people, like you said, in your life that are going to coach you, that are going to mentor you. And if that's something that you're listening at home, and if that's something that I could help you with, then you're going to find links below to find out a little bit more of that. But I won't turn this into a shameless self-promotion. I didn't start that for this. I started to definitely bring the story of my guest. And man, I love being a friend. It's been great to see your journey and see growth, because man, it's so cool to see how God's just been shaping and molding you, and you're becoming the person that you're called to be. And I just want to take a moment and encourage you there. But with that, so obviously you've had this small degree of success and career, and you're just getting started. Like you're just at the earliest parts of it. Yeah. But one question I wanted to ask you was that obviously through this, you've probably wanted to give up at some point. You probably felt burnout. So tell us about a time that you felt burnt out or wanted to give up, but instead you kept going.
Yeah. So I think the biggest, like, I don't know if it's ever like, I don't really feel like as an artist that ever really stops. Like, I feel like it happens in waves. Like,
For sure.
I mean, even just a month before we signed the distribution deal, I didn't know if I wanted to continue doing music. At the time I was a director at Chick-fil-A. And I actually liked it. Like, I enjoyed it. And if you don't know, like, you can make good money at Chick-fil-A as a director. And if you move your way on up. So like, yeah, so I didn't know if I wanted to do it. Cause it just seemed like there was a lot of hurdles. It seemed like there was a lot of red tape. It seemed like, again, that comparison game still creeps in time from time. And like, now I've learned to not to, I try to stay off. The only reason I'm on Instagram is if I'm like actively posting or doing that. I'm not scrolling, like, so if you posted a picture of your beautiful baby, I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Probably didn't see it.
So, but yeah, like, I think, yes, like a month before we signed, I was questioning, like, if I wanted to do music. And, I think, like, again, I think the only thing that like gets you through it is like just going back to the why. Like, why was I doing it in the first? Why did I, chase it in the first place? And it's the, give people hope to, like you said, like, write,
yeah,
to be able to write those songs. And I would hate to be, in my 40s, 50s, 60s, and then look back and think, man, like, how many people could have been impacted by these songs sitting on my laptop? Like, so yeah, I think the why. I think if you don't have a why, then you're gonna end up quitting, and you're gonna, like, not doing it. Like, so I think having a why is really important. And whenever you feel that way, when you feel like, man, this ain't worth it, or why am I doing this? You can always go back to that. And yeah, so that's what I would say.
Man, so good. Follow up that with, all right, so let's picture the future for a moment.
Okay.
When you're 95, 100, 120, however long you plan to live.
Yeah.
Hopefully a long and fulfilling life. What will you want to say? What will you want people to say most about your life?
Man, I guess to quote NF, that it was real.
I love it.
I mean, like, that's what I want to be. Like, I want to, not to drag the contemporary Christian music industry into the mud, but there's a lot of people in that industry I love. I mean, I'm in that industry. But a lot of stuff that's on, like, K-Love radio, it's someone call it fluff. But you know what I mean? Like,
talk to him.
But so
we keep it real here.
For me, like, and there's a lot of good songs out there. Like, there's a lot of good fluff songs out there. Yeah. But for me, as an artist, like, I want to write songs that I put it this way. This might be a weird way of thinking of things, but this is what goes through my brain. I want to write that song when you're flying, when you're on an airplane and you're flying over, like, the clouds, right? And you have the nice window seat, and you're looking out. It's nighttime, so you're just looking out into pitch black darkness, and you see the light of the wing flashing, and you have your headphones in because you don't want anybody bothering you, and you're listening to that song, and that song just got you in, like, the feels, right? Like, you just, like, that's what I want. I want every song that HNRY releases to be that song that makes you feel something, that makes you, whether it's makes you want to jump up and do a Pentecostal dance, or if you're, or, maybe it's, a song like If You're Be Quiet that just kind of gives you the, where you just want to like jump out of the plane. Don't do that though. But like,
Please don't. Please don't jump out of the plane.
do that.
Man, I'm such a visual person. Like, I'm just sitting over here picturing what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even to the point where you're just hyped, like you're just on your plane, you're hyped, and then you're like, just fly out of the plane. Don't do that, please.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Fear Be Quiet. That's the new single, right?
So that's the last single, that released. Yeah. The first one, only one.
And it's great. I love it.
Thank you.
It all the time. You listening at home, you're going to find all this stuff underneath in the caption, description, all that thing. And you're going to go run this back, share it with your friend, share it on your social media, show him some love, because not only is it a song with him, it features none other than the legendary Tedashii.
Oh, T-Dot.
Oh, T-Dot, man. If you know, you know. So I'm just curious. I would love for you to share how that happened. Like how you got connected and got a feature from him.
Yeah. So that's a funny story. So this song, I wrote this song in 2020. And that came out of that session was with Jess Cates. It was over Zoom. And for those who don't know who Jess Cates is like a legendary songwriter. He's written stuff for NSYNC. He has cuts with Bethel. He has cuts with Jeremy Camp. He also has a sync project. I'm sure everyone's used their song called Nothing Better? There's nothing better than this. Everyone puts it over their like family videos.
Love that.
Anyways,
good sync deal.
Oh yeah. So, but anyways, huge writer, and the fact that I was even able to write with him was just a miracle. But anyways, wrote this. I remember being on Zoom with him, and this was one of my first. I think I did like three co-writes before that. So like I'm green still, right? And I'm writing with this dude who's like I'm a big credit nerd. So like if I hear a song I like, I go straight to the credits. I'm like, who produced? Who wrote this? So I knew all his stuff. Like when I went in, I was like, this dude has written with everybody. And like what's that song? We used to do it a lot at church. It's Bethel. Trying to think what it's called. Anyways, Emily used to lead it a lot. I can't think of it. Anyways, he wrote that song. And like, I remember we led it Sunday, and then that Monday, like I'm writing with this guy. So I'm hyped. And so I get on the Zoom, and I have no idea what we're writing about. Like I brought nothing, like nothing. And he gets on, and he's like, hey man, so like, what's your story? And I tell him, I'm like, I'm Jonathan. Like it was just like, oh my gosh, it was so funny. I just told him about my music. Like I was a promoter, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And he's like, cool, man. But like, he wasn't asking for like my music. He wanted to know like my story, like Jonathan, like, And I was like, and that was really the first time I ever shared about, my speech impediment. Like I never really saw that as something that could be used as like a testimony. Like, cause growing up, like all the testimonies I heard were like these wild ones where like people were, addicts for long times, and then like God delivered them. And I'm like, I grew up listening to Stephen Curtis Chapman and watching VeggieTales. Like I
grew up in it.
Like, like the worst thing I did, I think was like, I think I talked back to my mom once, and that was it. And that was the last time I ever did that. But yeah, so I share my story, and he's like, well, that's the song, bro. So we ended up writing Fear Be Quiet. And I had that demo for a year and a half.
Man.
And I took it in with Jason Roy with Building 429, and we worked on it. And once we got what we thought was the finished project, it didn't sit right with me. Like I felt like I was like, man, I feel like this isn't it. And it was this like real big like radio CCM thing.
Right.
Not very like what it is now. So so it's set on my computer for till this year, till February of this year. And there's another friend of mine that's a writer. She writes with Word Records, and she posts like every session to her Instagram story. And that's what she does for a living. So like every day she's writing with someone new, and like every day I look at her. Her name's Rachel, and every day I look at Rachel's story, and she's writing with someone new. And this day she was writing with this dude named Zach Paradise, and he was in Atlanta. And the little 20 seconds that I heard of it, I was like, dang, that sounds good. Like, like it seemed very One Republic ish.
Yeah.
And I was digging it. And so I DM'd him on Instagram. And did you lose me?
No, you're here.
Okay. I DM'd him on Instagram and was like, hey man, I saw you write with my friend Rachel. I was wondering if you could, if you wanted to write. And so he was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So we get on Zoom like the next week, and we write a song together, and then we do like 3 more after that. Right. So we like write for like that next week. We wrote like 3 days in a row. Well, then that third day I was like, hey man, like I have this song that I've been hanging on to. And I was wondering if you could like maybe take a turn at it on the production side and see what you can do with it. And he's like, yeah, man, let's do it. So I sent it to him, and we started working on it. And we get to the bridge, and it had a bridge like written out, like that I sung initially. And but that was one of the parts I felt like it just didn't really sit right.
Right.
And, he's like, bro, I feel like this needs a feature. And just like that. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I'm thinking maybe like Holvey or maybe like Tedashii. And I'm like, yeah.
Make it happen.
Yeah. And I don't know with this, like, you have to understand. So he's like, he says that, and I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, I can ask Tedashii tomorrow. He'll be at my house. And I'm like,
I love it.
Why is Tedashii going to be at your house? And he's like, oh, I work for Reach Records.
Nice.
And I know that whenever I reached out to him, whenever he was writing with my friend Rachel, I just heard 20 seconds of something that I thought sounded sick. And I wanted to write with, I was just trying to write with everybody and anybody at the, and so anyways, so he asked Tedashii. Tedashii then texted me and was like, hey man, this is Tedashii. Love the track. Let's do it. And so that's kind of how I flew out to Atlanta, and we knocked it out. And yeah, like, and which we didn't know if it was going to happen. There was a scare because the week before we were supposed to track, Tedashii fell off stage and like had an accident.
I remember seeing that. That was crazy.
Yeah. So that happened. And like, I was like, do we still ask him? Like, like, oh, you're laying in bed. Can we get this verse tracked real quick?
Man, that's wild.
And, it was great. And like, he's been awesome and just so encouraging. But yeah, so that's how that happened with Fear to Be Quiet.
That's crazy. There's a few things I take from that as a creative songwriter myself. You've got to trust, which us that are in our faith rely on Holy Spirit. Some people probably call it gut or whatever you want to call it. Another way to say it's taste too, because I mean, as you develop as an artist, you trust your taste, and you know what you like. And just because something seems finished or ready, don't be afraid to revisit it. Now, I'm not saying like hold on to a song forever and never release it, never ship it out. Yeah. But I mean, like, you'll know when it's that right space. So I really encourage y'all. There's a pro tip for you from someone that has a song with Tedashii, because he chose to not accept it as face value. And that's one thing I would like to ask you, because you've mentioned you've done quite a few co-writing sessions. So what would you say to the songwriters or aspiring artists out there that haven't yet done any co-writing? So like, what would your advice to them be, how to get started in that space?
So I can tell you how I did it. So co-writing, it's everything. Like, collaboration is like, if you look at the top 10 pop artists, right? Name like anybody. If you go to their credits, there's probably like at least 5 or more writers on every song,
for real.
right? Like even more in the pop world. Like if you look at a Bieber track, bro, that's like 18. Like there's people that have
track, there's like 50.
yeah, they can like because it's just refined and refined and refined and refined. And so yeah, I think co-writing's everything. Like you know, and I think that's been my favorite, just to touch on that. Like, I feel like that's been my favorite part about the process is like seeing what other people bring to the table.
Sure.
You know, and being able to create something with someone else. Like, it wouldn't be any fun if it was just us, like individually.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, as far as getting started, like, you know, I guess it really depends on like where, you know, the genre and what kind of what industry you want to get into. In the Christian music industry, what I did was I literally messaged, like I Instagram DM'd almost everybody. Like if there is a writer that is signed to a label, they have a message from me in their DMs on Instagram. Like everyone. So, and that's what I did. I was like, because if you really think about it, at that time when I was doing that, I was like, man, like either like the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no or not respond. Like the best thing that happens, I get a session.
There you go.
And like, so that's what I did. And like when after that, I messaged probably like 40 something people, got 6 yeses. And then those 6 yeses then turned a lot of those no's into yeses, because what happens is when, for example, when I started writing with HNRY with Building 429, then all those other people who saw that was like, oh, well, if it's worth Jason's time, maybe it's worth my time, you know? And then like the Tedashii thing, it's like, okay, well, if Tedashii will jump on a track, then maybe I'll jump on a track. So it's kind of like a, you know, that kind of thing. I think just go for it. Like just reach out, you know, like, and I feel like if you can't,
Sorry.
You're good. If the Nashville thing or the LA thing isn't your thing, like there's tons of writers. Like if you're in the Dallas area, like there's tons of people in Dallas that write. Oh, yeah. Like there's a huge music, even like definitely worship. Like there's a huge worship community, and like, you know, so there's co-writes happening. I would say there's probably in any major city, there's probably co-writes happening every day. You know, obviously it's probably some more than others, but like there's sessions to be had no matter where you're at. I think it's just a matter of just getting, you know, stepping out and just doing it. Like ask, like if there's someone you want to write with, ask.
There you go. There's the tip. Just ask. And I'll take it even a step further is if you're surrounded by communities of musicians that you know, your friends, write with them, because they're wanting to write with people too. Like, I mean, that's how we started. Like our church released 2 albums now. Yeah. And out of that is birthed a lot of small connections of people writing music. And you're not going to write a song with someone else until you ask them if, hey, you want to write a song. And also don't be afraid of rejection, because your next no is just one more no closer to a yes, you know? So you have to be willing to push back that failure and step through that failure. And with that, we don't have a ton of time. I have like 2 more questions, and then I got to get going, and I don't want to take too much of your time. But I want you to share a quick story of like, what was your biggest failure and what did you learn most from it?
Man, biggest failure. Like within music?
Yeah, or anything in general. But you want to go the music route for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably my biggest setback would probably be not having a plan.
That's good.
And that's something that I see a lot of newer artists struggle with. Is that, you know, for me now, like I feel like even Scripture says, you know, you don't have a plan, you're gonna perish.
Come on. Say
So
it.
like, that's what it says.
Yep.
So I think having a plan, and when I'm with that, and I feel like what that looks like for me is like having a 5-year plan, having a 4-year plan, having a 3-year plan, yada, yada. And then what can I do today to set that up to make sure 5 years from now, Jonathan is going to look back and be like, man, I'm glad I did that, you know, because that got me here. So I think not having a plan was probably my biggest failure. And I think that's everyone's biggest failure, honestly. Like if you look at it, like, because if you don't know where you're going, then you're just gonna, especially in the creative world and with music specifically, if you don't have a plan, man, you're just gonna be spending money left and right, spending time left and right, and you're not going anywhere. Like you're literally spinning your wheels, and not going anywhere. So I think not having a plan was my biggest failure. And I think now having a plan, I think that's like, especially as an independent artist, I feel like that's your biggest advantage within your career. Like that's the secret sauce. Like if anyone asked, how did you do this? How'd you do this? I had a plan. Oh. Like I had a plan. Like and you know, for me, like you know, it's like, all right, in 1 year, this is where I want this to be, right? Like this is what I want this to look like. Whether this is where I want streaming to be. This is where I want Instagram to be. This is where I want our tour, you know, our live stuff to be, you know, and then year 2, like, and then saying, all right, what can I do today to make sure in that 1 year I meet that? Like, so it's just having a plan.
I love that. Have a plan. And I'll take it a step further is have the people in your life that are going to hold you accountable to that plan. Because sidebar, I know as a creative myself, but thankfully I've been wired to be creative and also very driven and like organized. So that's what I help my clients with. Like not only do I help them get in the right mindset to win and go after all they're going after creatively, but I also help them practically by making a plan and holding them accountable to it. Because a lot of times we can't see 360. I always say it that way. Like we can't see our blind spots. And we need those people in our life that are going to help us navigate the plan, help us refine the plan, and help us keep on track. So if you're out there and you're a struggling creative and you don't know how to make a plan, or you're not sure how to kind of get the steps together, or maybe you're just needing someone for that accountability, definitely reach out to me. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you, and I want to make that happen. But as we wrap up today's podcast, I want to close with one final question for you. And so, did you freeze?
No.
Okay. You froze for a minute on my side. So I was like, oh no. Okay. So final question for you is if you could go back 5 years, what creative advice would you give yourself?
I really feel like it's the last one, right? Have a plan. Have a plan.
It's the same thing. Yeah, like you answered it, and I was like, I feel like this is going to be what he answers.
Yeah,
but
like, you know, and just to add on that, I feel like we could add on that. Like,
for sure,
the biggest thing that stops people from making a plan is, it's going to change. Like the plan's going to change. Like, how can I make a 5-year plan when I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And I think you still have to make the plan knowing that, yes, it's probably going, like there's a 99.9% chance your plan's going to change, but that shouldn't stop you from making the plan. Right. I think that's the biggest thing is because like I said, like if I would have known where I'm going now 5 years ago, bro, like,
come on,
I'd be so much further, like, so much further than where I am now. And like, I mean, who knows, right? Like who knows where it'd be, but, I guess we'll know in 4 years. But
we'll do another podcast and we'll see how everything's gone 4 years later, 5 years later. Man, I love it. Again, Jonathan, Henry, man, I'm so glad that you took time to be on my podcast and hang out with this community of champions. The Better Than Best Academy is what we call it. But man, the new single, Fear Be Quiet, featuring Tedashii, go stream it. You're going to find all his social media handles. Show him support, show him love, because I'm sure you probably gained 20,000 more fans from this. Yeah. I'll speak it for you.
Of information here. So no one knows this. I just got the okay that I could talk about this about an hour ago. So in 3 weeks from now, or no, from tomorrow,
I'm recording.
Fear Be Quiet, featuring Tedashii and Neon Feather, the remix, releases.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Man, in 3 weeks. So it'll be a couple weeks before I post this. So if you're hearing this, you should go check, at least go pre-save if that's a thing. Definitely go do that. But man, Jonathan, Henry, my friend, I'm so glad that you were able to be a part of this show, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll talk a little bit once I stop this recording. But those listening and watching, again, like, subscribe, share, do all the things. Man, I always hate having to do this. It's like, I really hate to say all the things, but you know what to do. If you're a fan of this, you're going to support this, because you're not fans, you're family. And this community, man, I don't know what I would do without you guys. I'm so grateful for you guys. But with that said, I'm praying for you. I love you all. Now let's go live better than best as we conquer this week.
Peace.